and welcome to the Parenting Show. I'm Jennifer Anderson. With me, as always, my co-host and parenting expert, Alyson Schafer. Today we're talking about parenting the anxious child. And I know for a lot of our viewers at home, this is often, the Parenting Show is often a resource for folks to be able to sit down, maybe have a cup of coffee, listen over this next half hour and realize that they aren't alone in this topic. And certainly kids who are anxious seems to be more prevalent.
The rates for sure
today than ever before.
Yeah, the rates are really on quite a scary rise, actually. So it is something that probably every person, whether it's their own child, it's going to be somebody in their child's classroom, somebody who comes on a play date. I don't think that there is anybody out there that is in the world of parenting today that can't tell you a personal story of somebody who is dealing with anxiousness.
Right. And I certainly know from hosting the show with you for many years that you have often said you are not a medical doctor.
So I am not a medical doctor at all. No.
you're not even playing one on TV.
No. Although, if there's a casting call, I would give it a shot.
That's right. That's right. So this isn't about perhaps the medical aspect of being anxious, and there certainly are different levels of anxious.
Absolutely.
And anxiety.
Yeah. So now our viewers are wondering, why am I credentialed to be on the show if I'm not a medical doctor?
Yeah, no.
So my training is, I'm a family counselor,
right.
And I see people in private practice 2 days a week, so I work with a lot of families. And my training is in Adlerian psychology, and the whole basis for the Parenting Show has been teaching the world more about seeing children's behavior and parenting in a style through that lens. And I know that the name doesn't have a lot of brand recognition. Those Adlerians are bad marketers, but it's a very well-respected theory of psychology. And where it really is most applicable in parenting is when we look at how to be in respectful relationships with our kids. So it's about a democratic style of parenting. And when we look at children and their behavior, probably one of the more unique aspects that you won't see in other psychologies in terms of understanding children's behavior is we're always looking at what's the usefulness of the behavior. And so we'll play into that a little bit more as we start talking about anxiety. But I think even though we talked about the fact that anxiety is really on the rise, I want to just make it really, really clear. Anxiety is not something you cure. Anxiety is not something you ever get rid of. That we have core emotions that are biologically wired into us as a species, and they are for survival reasons, and we all have them. And anxiety is one of those core emotions. And they do. Did you see Inside Out, the movie?
Yes. Loved it.
Right?
Yes.
I mean, you'd have to watch it 15 times to get all the nuanced science behind it. But I watched it sort of skeptically, thinking like, how are they going to pull this off for kids? But they were very accurate. I'm sure a lot goes over kids' heads, but it's in there. Everything's in there from a psychological viewpoint of how that inside working goes. And so, yeah, there's that one of those 5 people at that control panel. One of them is anxiety.
So is it safe to say that it would be similar to somebody, they might not suffer from depression, but you can be depressed. You can, have a day where you're feeling kind of blue.
Right. So it's a good comparator where you sort of say that our mood goes up and we feel joyful and excited. If it goes too up, we actually are manic. And if it crosses a line and you end up actually having an incident with the law, or there's certain criterias, we say that's a manic episode and not so good. Same thing. We're all sad. It's sad when someone dies. It's sad when we lose a job. It's sad when we feel lonely. And that's normal and human. But if we get too sad for too long, then we say, no, that now is having a depressive episode. And so they're all normal, but we have a diagnostic manual called the DSM. And the DSM says, this long, this many days, and it creates a descriptor so that we're all talking about the same thing when we're trying to clinically diagnose somebody, which is helpful for research because it means that we're all looking at exactly the same variable. But it's also a bit political too, because they just changed the DSM and they've now said things like, for example, grief. If you're still sad so many days after somebody dies, that's now considered disordered.
Right.
And that's just a call that somebody made at the DSM. What it really means is that you have to go back to work sooner because you can't say, that you're still grieving.
Right.
Or we can put you on a medication now because we'd like to get you out of that depressed grief state so that we can get you back to the... So it does get political. And so same with the anxiety. There's a certain, when we're trying to categorize anxiety, there's different kinds according to the diagnostic manual. So some people just have generalized anxiety. They just are kind of that more like worried, hyper worried, right? Again, how worried should you be before it crosses into being diagnosed as anxiety?
Right.
So there's general anxiety, but there's also people that have like specific phobias. You know, if you've been bitten by a dog and you are now scared of dogs and you are phobic every time a dog is around, in a sense, we can kind of logically understand that. Your brain has had an experience.
Right.
It's wired for threat detection because we're survival instinct. Stay away from bad things. What bad things have happened to your life? Little fuzzy things come up and bite you. Okay, duly noted. Next time you see fuzzy thing, get the heck away from it. So you can see why evolutionarily it's trying to keep us safe. But at some point we have to say, yeah, not all dogs bite, and you know, not every dog is predatory, and not every dog bite ends in death, and maybe we could tone this down a bit. Right. And so that's working with somebody then who's had an anxious situation.
So how then do you, let's start with mild anxiety. How then do you...
Worrywart. We used to call it worrywart. There's my DSM diagnosis. This is what I mean, because honestly, I think we've gotten way too clinical with a lot of this stuff. You know, we call it ADHD. It used to be called ants in the pants.
Right.
Because parents get so, you know, oh, my kid's got a clinical diagnosis. It's like,
right.
Yeah, you know what? Yeah, your kid's a worrywart.
Well, so what happens? How do you then start to work? What am I trying to say? You don't want to diminish their anxiety.
No.
So even if they're worrywart, you don't want to say,
oh, you're such a worrywart. Yeah. No,
so how do you work with that to steer them away to try new experiences and, you know, take a step forward and make a new friend and those types of things?
Yeah, so I would say for parents, if you've got a child who's a worrywart or showing signs of anxiety, good for you for noticing, first of all. You know, we can't really do anything until we actually understand what's going on. And you know, there's a difference between being worried, being anxious, and being an introvert and being shy. You know, those are all kind of different things. So there's still some things to kind of pick through as you're getting to know your child. But if you're starting to see signs of that, the first thing I would do is say, get educated yourself. Any parent that is raising an anxious child needs to understand anxiety. Knowledge, knowledge, knowledge. So get yourself, I mean, besides the show, which is fantastic, great, but I mean, we only have a limited amount of time. Get online, talk to your doctor, talk to your pediatrician, get yourself knowledgeable yourself. It'll help you be more empathic to your child's situation, because it's really an awful feeling. It's really, I mean, I raised two kids who at different times had anxiety issues at different levels that they manifested, and it's terribly painful for them. So get yourself educated, and then the second piece would be check in with yourself, because when we're looking at how anxiety tends to manifest in kids, for sure this part that's genetic, for sure this part that's experience, like got bit by a dog or something scary happened. A lot of kids can have an adverse childhood experience that kind of primes their nervous system to be more anxious. And that can be small. That doesn't have to be like living through an earthquake or something. Having a surgery.
Right.
You know, we don't think about it, and even if it's before kids really lay down permanent memories, anytime you have a surgery, it's an invasion of the body. So we're thinking differently about what those traumas might look like now than we did in the past. But if you've had a child that's had an adverse experience, they've got a genetic temperament, but then a lot of times what that third variable is that parents have to own up to is that they're often anxious themselves.
Right.
And we create the environment that our children are trying to learn and piece together the world. And if I'm anxious as a parent, and I'm raising a kid who's sort of got the disposition for it, and then I start parenting them anxiously, so be careful, don't watch it, don't fall off the couch, are you okay there? Just a second, is that coffee cup too much? You know, get off the monkey bars, you know. Then you've got a kid who's coming into the world saying like, well, apparently there's many things to be afraid of. My mother seems to think, my father, I don't need to be gender.
Right, it's going to go one way or the other. They're going to become anxious.
Yeah.
Or they're going to be over the edge.
Oh, yeah. They're going to say, yeah, want to see me jump off those monkey bars, Mom?
That's right.
But it's so common that there is an anxious root at home, and which is why it's why I like family counseling, because we see things in a system. We don't just say, fix my child. I go, well, who's that child hanging out with? What are all the relationships? What are all the things that feed into it? Let's look at the whole family system. And usually there's a parent who is quite anxious. And it becomes very hard for that parent, and I'm saying this in a really empathetic way too, even though it's where the work has to be done, because anxiousness makes us so uncomfortable, then we project on our child that they must be suffering as we're suffering. And we just want to save them from the pain that we've experienced.
Right.
Right? So it really triggers a huge amount in the parent, and to have faith that your kid could do better than you if you could like let go. So it's a lot of work often on the part of the parent that's why I love having kids, where you can say, this is your time to grow. maybe up until now you've managed to mask it, deal with it, hide it, whatever it is, but now the rubber hits the road. Your kid is so important to you. It's time that we get this under control.
That's just such a difficult process, I would imagine, for somebody or a parent who is anxious, because one of their anxieties is probably letting go, or that fear of their child's getting hurt. It's much more difficult to then let go.
And again, it manifests in different ways, whether that's social anxiety, panic disorder. There's lots of, germs. There's many things that can play in with anxiety, but social anxiety is very hard, because one of the biggest jobs about parenting in the early years is teaching kids independence and things like sleep training or dropping them off at nursery school. And if you've got that attachment issue, if you've got social worries, then your baby's crying in the night, you're just going to want to go right to the crib. How are you going to sleep train? You're like, I can't leave a crying baby. What if I'm hurting them? What if they want me and I'm not there for them? And that's one of my fears. And so it becomes really difficult to do some of that very early socializing that's so important to kids. It's so much harder to sleep train a kid when they're 5 and 6 after there've been years of disrupted sleep patterns than there is to like nip it in the bud and get it in a more developmentally time appropriate manner. So it starts to create other problems and misbehaviors and things in the family. So it blossoms, I guess, is the best way to say it.
Speaking of sleep and bedtime, we did receive a question from one of our viewers.
Thank you. Can I just say thank you? We've got a very active group. We put things out on Twitter and Instagram, Facebook, and if you're on my email list, I sent out an email blast. And if you want to send in a question for other episodes, please keep sending them in. We do keep them. Yeah.
Yes, lots of questions. So that's great.
We have to call them. Yeah.
Yes. This one says, I would love to know how to best help my overly anxious daughter, especially during bedtime. Every night at bedtime, she recounts all the things that bothered or upset her during the day. She's very mature and sensitive and takes things very hard. I would like to teach her coping skills to better be able to deal with her anxieties so that she doesn't carry them around with her all day. What can empower her and help her feel more in control of her feelings when things or people disappoint her, as they often do?
So she might well be a child that would do really great getting some therapy, and not to say like this is like an extreme case, but just therapy is so effective that while I can train parents to be the therapeutic agent, there's also people that are trained in this and specialize in this and could just bring relief so quickly, So I would definitely say to people, seek out professional help if you've got somebody who's looks like they're really quite struggling and young. But here's to give her some practical advice besides go ask someone else. So at bedtime, often the mind revs at night because there's nothing else to distract us, right? We're lying in bed, and where does the mind go? Her mind has not going so much to the worrying, but going to the recounting and the
rehash.
The rehash, and then feeling bad about the rehash. So that's kind of interesting, because with the anxiety, we tend to be future forward, saying, what if, what if, what if? What's tomorrow going to be like? Are my friends going to... It's a future orientation, worrying about things that haven't happened yet. And depression is more a backwards focus, where you ruminate and perseverate over what's happened in the past. So, these things can be mixed. These are never... humans are complex. There's emotions can be entwined. We can be both happy and sad. We can be both anxious and depressed. But if she's recounting the day, the mind she's getting some. She needs to put her worries to bed. She needs to distract herself. And here's where mom can help. One thing she can do is you can get like a little jar, and you can draw little paper butterflies. And then she can say all the things, all the fluttering thoughts that are going around, all her worries, all the things that are keeping her from sleeping, and write each one down on a little butterfly. And she can put it in the little jar, write them all down. Maybe there's 5 or 7 of them, whatever. Put them all in a little jar, like a mason jar, and then seal it with all the little butterflies in there. and say, there's all those worrying thoughts, and they're right here, and tomorrow you can come back and let them out again, but right now you need to sleep. They're safe, they're fine, they're parked, they're contained. Some cultures have worry dolls where they put their little dolls to bed, and each doll is a certain worry. So it's not uncommon in different cultures and different times for the same idea of containment. It's fine, it's looked after, now you're relieved of it. But the other thing is, what else might she think about? And this is where I think, again, we're using the parent to help train the child about the nature of their mind. Whatever you think about, you lay down neural tracks, and your mind gets habituated to wanting to think those thoughts. And so with older kids, I kind of use the analogy of pop-up boxes. Like, why is it whenever you go to, Amazon, it takes me to all the Harry Potter books? How does it know that? Is it magic? No, because it knows every time you go to Amazon, you're looking to see for the next Harry Potter book, and it's tracking where you're going. Yes. And it's now giving preferential treatment. It's shooting recommendations back at you. And your brain's the same thing. You like to think about worrying about making friends in kindergarten tomorrow. We're going to send you right there tonight as you're going to bed. So if we can get kids to understand that, then we have to say the pop-up box of, I'm going to worry about my friends tomorrow. You're like, nope, that pop-up box is on a butterfly in a jar. Close that pop-up box. Where would you like to go in your brain instead? Let's go to thinking about your birthday party. Wow, that's exciting. And if you can train your brain to say, I choose what I'm going to think. I'm not going to go to my default habit. I choose to think happy thoughts. Then you strengthen the wiring of that thinking pattern and that thinking habit. So think of what your kid can think about that's distracted. And let's also remember it's bedtime. And how many kids are like, oh, I can't sleep. I'm really worried. Would you stay with me all night so I don't have to sleep alone? Well, I'm not saying they do it consciously, but I'm saying this is where you get the secondary benefit. They might truly have been anxious, but they learned when I'm anxious, I get a different response from adults, and I can get a later bedtime.
Yes. This is your step-up game to I need a glass of water.
Right, exactly.
And it doesn't mean that they aren't anxious. It just means that now there is a benefit, and you can have help at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock
and
at night.
Again, it's pre-conscious. But children learn from experience, and they repeat things that are useful and serve a purpose. Right. And one of those purposes can be, I get more socializing when I am in a more distraught state than when I am in a calm state. And so we have to really watch for that. Not that we can't be empathic, and not that we can't soothe our kids, but we can't go overboard.
Can I just say, I love your analogy about Amazon.
Yeah.
10 or 11 years ago, when we started this show, the analogy was popping bubbles. Oh, right?
Yeah.
You talked about, being able to pop a bubble in your mind. Now, with technology, we're pop-up bubbles from Amazon.
I had to update the metaphor. Got to keep it in the now. But actually, bubbles still work for little kids, right? So you could still, it's still, I think, kind of cute, right? Where if you blow a little stream of bubbles and you teach your kids that those thoughts are like each one is a thought that you could just thought blocking, just smack that bubble. Don't think that thought. Close that window.
Yeah, that's right. It's evolved. Technology has evolved our metaphors on this show.
Yeah, well, and I think part of technology is part of what's making teens anxious.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
I think that has been a real side effect that we're looking at more now in the science in terms of what the effects of that are. And I think every parent needs to have a talk to their kids about paying attention to your mood state before, during, and after your interactions with technology. And you know me, I'm pro-technology. Mm-hmm. I absolutely am. But if your day is, I was all happy, then I went online and I started looking at everyone's Instagram feeds, and suddenly I'm feeling like I'm not attractive, and everybody has a glamorous life, and everyone went to that party on Friday night. No one invited me to that party. I was completely fine when I woke up this morning, but I spent 5 minutes on my phone, and now I'm a wreck.
Yes.
So I think that's an important thing for teens and tweens to pay attention to, so that you can say, there's some days when we're just in a better state of mind and we're like, oh, I missed the party. Or, oh, well, she's fine, but I'm fine too. But sometimes we don't have the capacity, and we need to learn to shut it down and say, that's not helping me right now. So
teaching kids the coping skills to shut those things down, but also as a parent, recognizing the triggers.
Yeah, and pointing it out to our kids, because they're not as self-reflective at that age as we might with our wisdom. So I don't want to say, those things are terrible, they're wrecking kids' lives. That's not going to land well on kids. But if you say something like, I really noticed that before you picked up your phone today, we were all sitting here and chatting, and now you kind of seem a little grumpy. What did you just look at? What just happened there? Have you paid attention? Is it making you more stressed, less stressed, more happy, more connected, the kind of connection you want? And just ask those curiosity questions to them so that they learn to become more self-aware, more self-monitoring.
Right. Another question that we have, this one's a little bit long, so I'm going to try and paraphrase. My eldest daughter is 10, and she has quite a difficult combination of personality traits. She's generally quite rigid, inflexible in her thinking. She can be a perfectionist and gets anxious about certain things where small issues snowball into feeling bigger. And we have to work with her.
So many people are identifying with this right now, can I tell you?
Yes.
Yeah.
And we have to work with her to bring them back to a place where she feels like she can manage. As you can imagine, her comfort zone for new experiences or ones with lots of potential variability is quite small. I feel like if we were to let her live within the small comfort zone, she will grow accustomed to it and not stretch to experience new things, to learn to flex her ability to grow and adapt to the world around her. Going to a sleepover camp would be way outside of her comfort zone.
She's 10.
She went this summer for 2 weeks, and while she experienced some homesickness, she had a good time talking excitedly about all she did and some of the funny programs she participated in.
That's awesome.
Yes. So there's a very different reaction to that. However, she has already started ruminating about next year when the camp stipulates, already, you have to go for a longer period of time, 3.5 weeks minimum. So she enjoyed herself, but on the other hand, she's also worried about next year. So there's a lot of different elements there.
Yeah.
But congratulations on
That's
kind
a
of
big
moving,
step.
like that's a huge outside of your comfort zone.
Yeah. So, and that's, I think, one of the biggest takeaways that I want parents to take from the show, which is when we have a child that is exhibiting anxiousness, if we go beyond empathizing and actually smooth away the thing that is making them anxious and don't allow them to build up some resiliency towards it, then they won't grow out of their anxiety. We can't clean up the world to make it an environment that doesn't provoke their anxiousness. Instead, we have to build up the robustness of the child. And so I think maybe the one that would be the most understandable to parents, and then we'll make a parallel, would be like, for example, with the dog that we started off with. If we had a child that was trying to overcome their fear of dogs, we would start by just looking at a picture of a dog. And then we might look at a live video of a dog on a laptop. And then we might go to a pet store and look at one that was behind glass. And then we might have one in a room on a leash. And each time we call this an exposure ladder, where we're increasing the child's exposure to and building up their tolerance for that exposure.
Right.
Until finally they can actually like pet the dog and whatever, and they get over that fear that they're like, okay, maybe dogs are okay. So now we have to do the same thing with things like new experiences. I don't want to go to camp, or I have never done 3.5 weeks, or whatever it might be. So she's actually done part of this, which is, well, we started with 2 weeks and you made 2 weeks. So now are we ready for 3.5 weeks? And so that would be the next natural trend. But if she finds that her kid's completely flooded by all of that, you know, we can say not ready for 3.5 weeks yet.
Right.
But that doesn't mean not ever.
But also the fact that 3.5 weeks is 12 months away allows the mind to fester for a long period of time, right?
And so I might work with a child like that and say something like, we'll make this decision together. We won't think about this again till June, when that's the time that we can look at whether or not you're ready then. They need to be able to know that they've got sort of an out and options, so they don't feel stuck and trapped. And I think when you have a good relationship with your child and you can really look them in the eye and say, you know I have your back. You know I would never put you in a situation that I didn't think that you could manage. So yeah, there might be uncomfortable, but you know, kids will often be calmed by that. And then you can have a little bit of fun with it, again, not to be demeaning, but you can kind of, when we're not anxious, when we're calm and we want to exude that, you can do that with a little bit of humor.
Right.
Like, you know, knock yourself out. It kind of seems like a silly hobby, but you know, if you want to keep yourself busy worrying about it all year, but I know I'm not going to think about it again until June. You know? Well, some people do puzzles, some people, you know, play with their dolls, but you know, I guess you want to think about camp for a bit. And just sort of make it, say it's a hobby. It's
not a big deal.
You could do something else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That kind of leads into the last point of being able to build up esteem. How do you build up esteem so you can empower kids to say, I can do this. I can overcome this.
Well, so that comes with because a lot of the anxiousness comes from like the what if and what if I can't manage, that I'm going to be in danger. So we have to give the brain, the cognition, some feeling of, you know, I might be thrown into a threatful situation, but I know me and I can count on me and there's lots that I can do. I can manage life. So it might not be the managing dogs, but you might start by saying, but you know, let's look at all the other things that you can do. You can get yourself dressed. You can pour your own cereal. You can help mommy clean windows. You help mommy make pancakes. The more things that you can do to help a child develop skills, mastery, autonomy, control, and the more that you can feed back to them, you're so capable, you can do it, you managed, all those messagings start to develop a counter belief system that says, well, the world might have some scary things in it, but I'm a pretty powerful person in the sometimes scary world.
Right. A lot of information that we've talked about today is in your books.
Thank you very much. Yes, true enough.
Not only this topic, but many topics for parents to find a little bit of a toolkit.
Absolutely. You know, and I've written 3 of them. So the first one was Breaking the Good Mom Myth, and for sure that really talks a lot more about about how we are anxious and overbearing and some of our parenting habits that we think are good intention, but actually often aren't in the long run. And Honey, I Wrecked the Kids is much more about the misbehavior and that from a philosophical Adlerian point of view, understanding kids' misbehavior. And then Ain't Misbehaving was the last one, and it really came from things like this show, where we have a lot of people asking questions, or people that ask questions at the end of a talk, and I just collected up a whole bunch of those questions and broke them into categories. So it's really a solution book. There's a little primer at the beginning, but really, if you just want to look like, you know, kid will only poop in a pull-up behind the Schafer plant. Page 66.
That's my kid.
Yeah. But you don't have to read the whole thing. So it's quite good for people that are busy, or if you want to give it to a caregiver.
Right.
You know, it's fast and easy to read.
And a few seconds left, but lots of topics also on your website.
Absolutely. Please go visit. Tons and tons of blog posts and videos.
Very good. Also videos on the Rogers TV YouTube channel, and that will include all episodes of The Parenting Show, so make sure you take a look at all of the other shows that you may have missed. RogersTV.com is a great resource as well to find out when this show is airing at different times during the week. And of course, we want to say hello to all of our viewers online and across Ontario, New Brunswick, and Newfoundland.
From the rock.
Yes. But for now, this episode is ended. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time on The Parenting Show.